Hello, church. Pastor Jack here, and welcome to my study. Welcome to my channel, First Things First with Pastor Jack. Do all the YouTube stuff. We're going to get started pretty quick today. We have a very interesting topic that I have been working on a little bit that I want to talk to you about, and I'm calling this the history of the New Testament. And I believe this is a topic that a lot of students of the Bible need some training on. And if you've never attended Bible college, you're not going to probably ever hear about a lot of stuff we're going to talk about in this series, but I hope that it will help you in your walk and help you understand what you have when you have that New Testament in your hands and that Bible. What great thing that you have there that we should be very, very proud of. And actually, the what really got this going is I was doing a video that day, and I couldn't come up with Texas Receptus, and I wrote a paper on that one time, and I couldn't come up with those words, and I said, I need to relook at some of this. And as I started looking at it and read a couple of little books I had on it, I thought, this would be something good to tell everybody about. So the history of the New Testament, autographed originals. That's what they tend to call the original writings, and we have none. There are no autographed originals. We have what we call text, and there are copies and copies of copies of copies, and that's what we have. And we don't have any of the originals. I believe that's God's plan. I really do. I believe God uh, knew that we probably would hold them, I don't know, too high. If somebody actually had an original copy of the book of John, let's say, that I just don't know that there wouldn't be some people worshiping it, and so maybe God did that on purpose. I don't know, but where did the New Testament come from? We there've been a lot of theories, but I want to just tell you the truth, and this is the truth from just reading books, history books of the times around the New Testament was written, and an era we call the Apostle Fathers. And it's very important that we understand, what was said, because there's conspiracy theorists out there that believe there were hundreds of gospels that the bishops of the church just didn't like the way they made Jesus sound, so they didn't include him. And that just was not the truth. There was great unity in the early church from every documented book that we have that come from that time. There was great unity. The early church didn't feel like they chose the books. They felt like they were given those books. And there wasn't any controversy at all. When you read books written by the Apostle Fathers and then their disciples, who wrote a lot of books, you don't start seeing any controversy about other books or anything till like the fourth century, and the Gospels come out of the first century, and it's just not, it didn't happen. And there's critics out there that tries to blow it up. The Da Vinci Code. I don't know if you watch that movie or any of that, but and it makes an interesting story, but it's a story. It's not the truth. But in the first century, and you can pretty much say a good rule of thumb is that a generation's about 40 years. So the apostles and the apostle fathers really include two generations. So the apostles, John was alive still, and some of the other apostles for several years, let's say for 40 years after Christ was crucified. And then the apostle fathers, who are the ones that the apostles trained, were alive for 40 years. And then the next generation was alive for 40 years. So 120 years, let's say, the apostles and the apostle fathers were alive and well on planet Earth. And the second generation of apostle fathers probably got to hear John teach. Okay? So we can pretty much say that for 140 years after Christ was crucified, the apostles' teachings was still center of the church, dead center. It was, and the apostles, chose the books. If you want to say somebody chose them, the apostles stood for those. There's actually apostle fathers that wrote how that John endorsed the other three gospels plus the one he wrote. So if you start hearing stories about why wasn't the Gospel of Judas or one of these other silly gospels that has come about, and you can go buy them at a bookstore somewhere, why wasn't they included? Mainly because John and the apostles didn't say they were legitimate. They said every book in the New Testament was legitimate. The apostles, remember now, the apostles were people that spoke for God. I'm a man of God, but I'm not an apostle and I don't speak for God. You know, they were the prophets, if you would, for the New Testament. And when they died, there's not been any more apostles. But there were men they taught, and those men stood up for the books that the apostles said. So, how did we get the books that's in our New Testament? We can say from the apostles. I don't know that I need to have any other reason to believe the books that we have. The copies of the books were made. The originals, again, are gone, and we have copies of them. Some of the texts that we have, we believe, date to like 75 years after the original was written. We have some that we found that are texts of the New Testament that we believe was written, copied sometime around 75 years after the original. So that's good. And there was copies and copies and copies. Now, how many copies? Well, we don't know. How many copies do we have? They tell me that we have 5,400 texts. And when we say that, they range from full copy of the New Testament to books to fragments of different lengths. 5,400. That's quite a few. You won't find of any other books, you will not find any other ancient book anything that was even written about most of those until 200 or 300 years after the thing happened, and then you won't find much. God has preserved his book. There is no doubt about that. We can rest assured of that. So how many copies were made? Well, we don't know. More than 5,400. There was a lot more than that. We actually don't know how many were made. There is no doubt that some people had a copy and they allowed, hundreds of copies to be made from it. And other people may had a copy and they treasured it and wouldn't allow anybody else to look at it. You can imagine, people take good care of books that they like. I've got Bibles on the desk behind me that I take good care of. I take good care of all my Bibles. But, people who love God, love His Word. And so, we have 5,400 texts of some length from the whole New Testament to fragments that we have today. We don't know how many copies were made, and some of the ones that we have, we believe, dated back to 75 years after the original was written, so back into the first century. And remember, we said that the apostles and the apostle fathers actually were in charge all the way through like 140 years. So some of these copies we have were from that period. And so we have really good understanding of, what was supposed to be in the New Testament, and we have a good basis on what was supposed to be in there, what books were supposed to be in there, and what those books said. So we'll come back next time and we'll look further at how we got the English versions that we have, and we'll talk about things that we call variants. And, you're going to be surprised to understand that some people claim there's 500,000 variants, 500,000 variants. Well, I'll explain to you how they got that number and how that's nowhere near true. And I'll talk to you about how many variants, like is in chapter 9 of Romans, which is a very, very important chapter in Romans. But we'll talk about variants and what they mean and what you should understand about them. But that's in the next video. God bless you. Keep the first things first. And I'll see you on the next video.